Jessa? Hello, Jess. Hello, Jess. Anak, need green ko, ano na? Green ko, ano? Para magharataas ako dito.
Ada kahamangan langit pagdayang Pagkagon ang mga panulay kani amoy agawin ang mga From our humble beginnings, we began to shine. Taking little footsteps, we began to climb. Near or far, we have reached across the mar. From Kapaloka, Mercedes, Bahamas, and Pasay. From our halls, we bought their rise. Achievements and awards now we prize. Join us and we'll show you the greatness of SSU. Summer State University, soaring high with excellence. Seeds of innovation, we'll build and serve the nation. Summer State University, it's the best for you and me. Your future and dreams come alive. So come on to Summer State University. Summer State University. Come on. Summer State University.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for finding time and visiting today's webinar on writing and packaging research articles for journal publication. Today is our 5th day of the webinar series. My name is Fankis Aikaaga, and I will be your moderator. Now, before proceeding, let me ask you one question to check if you can see and hear me well. So, do you hear me well? Kindly type yes and send it to our chat box or give us a cue by giving us thumbs up. Okay. So for a few reminders before we get started, please rename your name by indicating first your school, followed by an underscore, and then followed by your full name. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. I will bring them up during the presentation, and we will also have time for questions at the end. Second, today's webinar will be available on demand after the live session at our Countryside Development RJ account at our SSU official FB page. Next, we'd like to encourage you to share today's webinar with your social networks. You can post this webinar directly on your Facebook accounts. And lastly, the links of the Google Forms for attendance, session evaluation, quiz, and the activities that will be given by our speaker and facilitators will be sent to our chat box. Now, we can begin. Our session is all about choosing data and writing the results. So without further ado, to give the recap and to present the evaluation results, let us welcome the managing editor of the Journal of Academic Research and Countryside Development Research Journal, Dr. Marife Lacaba.
My warmest greetings to all the
Hey,
My
my
warmest
warmest
greetings to
greetings
all
to
the
all the
participants
participants
here in
here in
Zoom.
Zoom.
In the
In the
previous
previous
session,
session,
our
our
resource
resource
speaker,
speaker,
Dr.
Dr.
Abigail
Abigail
Cabagin,
Cabagin,
discussed the
discussed the
importance of the
importance of the
methodology
methodology
section
section
in a
in a
research
research
paper.
paper.
She
She
started
started
differentiating a
differentiating a
research
research
method
method
from a
from a
methodology.
methodology.
Because of
Because of
that,
that,
we've
we've
learned that
learned that
research
research
method
method
pertains to the
pertains to the
process,
process,
while the
while the
methodology
methodology
explains the
explains the
methods of the
methods of the
process.
process.
She
She
also
also
accentuated the
accentuated the
relationship
relationship
between a
between a
method
method
and a
and a
methodology.
methodology.
The
The
framework is the
framework is the
methodology,
methodology,
and the
and
tool
the
or
tool
the
or the
tools are
tools
the
are the
methods.
methods.
We've
We've
identified
identified
studies as
studies
the
as the
qualitative
qualitative
research
research
method
method
and a
and a
quantitative
quantitative
method,
method,
and later
and later
apprehended
apprehended
designs or
designs or
approaches
approaches
under
under
each
each
method.
method.
She
She
also
also
presented the
presented the
different
different
components of a
components of a
research
research
methodology,
methodology,
which
which
includes
includes
research
research
design,
design,
research
research
local,
local,
samples,
samples,
data
data
collection,
collection,
data
data
analysis,
analysis,
and
and
ethical
ethical
consideration.
consideration.
She
She
briefly but
briefly
profoundly explained
explained
each
each
component
component
and
and
provided
provided
examples.
example.
As a
As a
whole,
whole, the participants have rated the previous session as excellent. They are very grateful because they learned a lot from Dr. Kabagin and they are excited to redo or write their methodology. Once again, good afternoon.
Thank you so much, Dr. Marife. Right now, to introduce our speaker for this session is a faculty researcher of RCCSI, Ms. Julianne M. Kilatan.
Thank you, Aika. Good afternoon, everyone. Our speaker this afternoon used to be my immediate supervisor when she was still the director for the Research Center for Culture and Social Issues until she became or she got promoted as the executive director for research in Summer State University. She had been hailed as one of the top researchers in the university, earning herself a reputation in the field of research. She garnered various awards for her research papers as she competes in local, regional, national, and international research competitions. Furthermore, her papers have been published in reputable international journals and have been cited for quite a number of times. Despite her numerous milestones achieved in the name of contributing to the body of knowledge, she continues to serve the country by sharing her expertise to the newbies and veterans alike who have the same interests as hers. So, ladies and gentlemen, our speaker for this afternoon, Dr. Sherry Ann Cananoa Lapid.
Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so um, it's good to be here, and I'm thankful that I was given this opportunity to share my knowledge along writing and packaging research article. Thank you, Ms. Julie, for that generous introduction. My greetings to our participants this afternoon. I see that we have participants from the DepEd, from Summer State University. Others are research directors of ours. We also have, of course, I'd like to mention Dr. Labrague and Dr. Abadjano, who has been supportive in the many research undertakings of the university. And I also see some participants from other universities of the region and other parts of the country, other parts of the globe. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you for supporting this activity and thank you for participating. Okay, so this afternoon, what we will be discussing are simply things related to research. And of course, basically, I was told that I am supposed to discuss things related to choosing data and writing results. Before I proceed, for a start, probably I can request the participants to open their video. Let me see if you are there, and you can probably give me a thumbs up if you can hear my voice clearly. Hello. Okay, so how do I? Okay na. Okay. Hello, guys. Okay, now, so we will start with our first topic, and that is something to do with choosing data. Okay, so some participants of this afternoon's activity are I saw that some of you are of course teachers, researchers, enthusiasts in the field of research, and I see that some are also graduate students of the different institutions of the country. So by now, you must have been acquainted as to how you are going to go through with the writing and packaging of your research article. So if you have attended the various lectures of this series, then you must have learned how to package your introduction, your methodology, and also, if I remember right, Dr. Orali, our Vice President for Research and Extension, has made mention of the role of the storyline in the writing of our paper. Okay, so let me go back to my point. I was saying that I think majority of our participants are also graduate students, and based from the previous surveys, you must have written at least written your thesis or your dissertation. Others I know are still on the process of preparing one. Now, you know, guys, in many cases, presenting and publishing research and scientific articles is one of the requirements for graduate students to finish your academic program. Okay, you know that. I know of some institutions or graduate schools who really require their students to come up with paper presentation and publication. You see, publishing research findings is one of the more important ways to share our research data to a scientific community. However, we should know that the structure of master's thesis or doctoral dissertation is different from that of a research article. Okay, so just a very brief review. I understand that all of us have already we have already finished our masters. Probably others are still undergoing their masteral program. Others are into dissertation. So we must have known that there are basically there is this 5-chapter format of either master's thesis or a doctoral dissertation. Although in our country and other institutions abroad, they have already shifted to a 3-chapter format where it only considers the introduction, and then there is the methodology, excuse me, methodology, and we have also the conclusions. It follows that of the AIMROD, okay? Introduction, methodology, and result and discussion sections, which conforms to the AIMROD or the IMRAD, IMRAD format of a scientific article. Okay, the university where I finished my doctorate has already conformed to this 3 chapter format, but others I know are still following the 5 chapter format. Okay, so from here, we see that the requirements for writing our dissertations and theses are actually dictated or mandated by our university. So regardless of every thesis should detail a methodical approach to answering a research question. So the question now is, how do we turn our thesis into a scientific paper or a research article or a research, a journal article? While both contain similar sections, your thesis and that of your journal article contain similar sections, you cannot simply publish your thesis as a research article. Converting it into a journal has many steps. It is important to recognize that articles are much longer. Okay, articles are much longer. No, research articles are much shorter. Of course, our thesis and dissertation are longer than our research article. Okay, so since we have a voluminous data for our thesis and our dissertation, it is necessary that we choose or we use this data properly. In other words, the starting point in transforming our thesis and dissertation into a research article is actually choosing data, choosing the right data. But you see, guys, there are differences between thesis and your research article. By the way, I'm in a hurry and I forgot to flash my screen. So these are the learning objectives for this afternoon's activity. So I don't have to read it myself, but definitely it's only categorized. There are only 3 objectives that we have. One is you should be able to explain the importance of choosing your data. And then we move on to the discussions on result section. Let me go back to my point. I was saying that there are differences between thesis and research article. Okay, so first we have here the research article, of course, is shorter than, see, I can see, okay. Research article, the abstract is shorter, introduction is shorter, of course. And in here we see that the data only, the data presents only what is, we only have the data. We only get data that will support our research problem or our hypothesis. Okay, so along the discussion, okay, the discussion in a research paper is more focused than in our thesis. And of course, the last one in there, we have only citations of articles mentioned are listed in the reference section. So from here, how do we transform our thesis how do we transform our thesis or dissertation to a research article? So what do we do here? So I have lifted things from the tips from the Inaugural Academy, and these are some suggestions that they provided. Okay, so here is, we need to extract the data that answers just one research question. So for all you know, if you have written your master's thesis and your dissertation, you should know that there are many questions that you are trying to answer in your study. Okay, so what you're going to do here is you only have to extract the data that will answer even just one research question. Okay, later I'm going to give you an example. Okay, next is you discuss results in context with your problem statement. So that is the focus, that should be the focus of your paper. In here, good language and structure are crucial because your paper may get rejected even though it contains valuable data if it is difficult to understand. In here, I like to emphasize the use of, again, let me go back to the point, the storyline. So you use in here, you use your storyline and you use your data to tell a coherent story and avoid sweeping conclusions your data cannot support. And of course, you have to ensure that your title matches the contents of your paper. Okay, so let me see. I have here an example. Okay. Yes po.
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes
Dr.
po.
Labby.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes po. Kindly show po your screen, your PowerPoint presentation.
I've been showing.
Thank you, ma'am.
Yeah, I've been sharing my PowerPoint presentation kanina pa po. Hello.
Post screen po.
Yes, Miss Aika.
Yes po. Post screen po, ma'am.
Oh. How is it? Hello, Miss Aika. Hello. Could you please give me some feedback? Hello.
Hello, ma'am. Yes po.
Yes po.
S5 po.
Can you now see my slides?
Oh, not yet po, ma'am.
Oh, I've been sharing it since my presentation. Just a moment. Okay, so excuse me for a while. Hello, Miss Aika.
Hello, ma'am. Ma'am, click slideshow po.
Hello. Miss Aika, could you please give me some feedback? How is it now? Hello? Yeah, can you see my
Yes
slides?
po. Okay na, ma'am.
Okay.
Yes po.
You mean to say kanina hindi nakikita yung slides ko?
Yes
Hello?
po, ma'am, we can see your slide po.
Oh, I see. Okay, you should have given me some feedback a while kanina pa. Okay, so this is it. I've been discussing these things a while ago as to choosing our data. Okay, so this is it. I have shown the difference between the research article and that of the thesis. Now, I was saying that uh, when you come up, if you have your master's thesis or your dissertation, definitely you will have voluminous data, and in most cases you have about 3 to 5 major research questions. Okay, so when you come up with a research article, you do not usually uh, use all this 3 to 5 research questions, because in that case you will have a very lengthy article, and for all you know, um, if you publish your paper in a reputable journal publication, there is only a limited, I mean, you will only be given about, say, for example, for others, 10 pages, a maximum of 20 pages. So in that case, if you are going to publish, if you're going to package your whole dissertation or master's thesis, I am afraid you will not be accepted. And so that's it. So now with this, so what you're going to do, just like what I've said in the first item, you only have to extract the data that will answer your research question, or one or two research questions. Now, this one is an example, okay? This is actually my dissertation, okay? So it has something to do with the title of which is Maternal Healthcare Utilization in the Philippines, employing the chi-squared automatic interaction detector analysis, or the CHI. Oh, so I tried to come up with a publication, a research article out of this. So I did not include all the maternal healthcare services, but I only included one. Okay, so let's go through the specific questions of my dissertation. Okay, so these are the big questions that I have answered. So just like what I've mentioned, if you are going to package your paper, if I'm going to package my paper considering all these the major maternal healthcare services, so I am afraid I will have a very lengthy paper. So I have just chosen one maternal healthcare service, and that is in one of my papers. I only considered the antenatal care service of our country. Okay, so this one. When I package a paper, which I entitled a child model to analyze, I mean a child model to analyze antenatal care utilization in the Philippines. Sorry, nawala yung S. Okay, so I only considered one question, and in here, I only focused on the factors, on exploring the factors that predict the successful utilization of the antenatal care service in the country. And in cases in the publication, there are times that you do not use specific questions. There are journal articles who would like you to just give your research objective. Of course, you know that research objectives could either be stated in a declarative form or in an interrogative form, and that's just all right. But of course, if you are going to conform to the guidelines of the journals, then some would require you to state it this way. Okay, so the paper that I packaged for a journal for publication has now this research objective, and that is to investigate the factors that predict successful utilization of antenatal care services in the Philippines using the chi-squared automatic interaction detector. Sorry, wala na pong question. It's no longer a question. So that's it. So what I'm trying to drive at now is you do not use the whole data of your study. So you just get a portion of your data. Of course, basically, you have to know first what is your research objective, because this becomes your guide in, again, choosing your data. In choosing your research objective or your research questions will be your guide in actually choosing your data. Okay, so do we have questions so far? Do we have questions here in choosing this data? Because I'm not, we will now be moving on to the next. Okay, do we have questions? Okay, so let's take a break. So smile lang na kayo dyan. Are you still okay? Do we have questions along choosing our data? If you have some questions, if you have some concerns, I would suggest that we can make use of our chat box here. Okay, so thank you. There are some comments here in the chat box. Okay, Zoom group chat. Thank you so much. I wasn't able to read this. Okay, but it's good. I have this opportunity to do it now. Okay, so that's it in choosing your data. So let's now move on to the next. We now move on to the next discussion, and there's something to do with writing results. Okay, so let us, as a sort of a review, let me show this IMRED structure. Okay, so in packaging your paper, when you submit your paper to a publication, in most cases you are to conform your, let's say, talking about master's thesis or dissertation, you are supposed to conform this to the IMROD structure. Generally, most of the publications that we have would require researchers to follow this structure. Okay, so basically, when we talk about IMRAD, there are just 4 basic parts of the paper, and that is, we have the introduction, the methods or the methodology section, and then we have the result and the discussion. Okay, so in here, of course, you will notice that we have these dotted lines. There are, of course, journals who would require them, but who would require to discuss, who would require the researchers to discuss the study site. And of course, in terms of conclusions, sometimes this is, well, this is basically part of a research paper. Those dotted are sometimes optional in other journals. Okay, so these are the questions on the rightmost part of my slide, you will find out that there are questions here, and these are the usual questions that researchers are answering, addressing when they form or when they come up with the discussions in each of these formats. But basically, ladies and gentlemen, this afternoon, I'm not going to discuss other introductions and other things because they were already discussed by the previous speakers and the previous resource persons. So my task this afternoon, aside from the first one that I discussed a while ago, I will be discussing to you things related to methods sections. No, I'm sorry, results section. Specifically, of course, we will talk about writing the results section. So, what you should know about the result section. Basically, if you go back to our IMRAD structure, the result section is next to methodology. Okay. Now, I'd like to stress that in your results section, it is necessary that we bear in mind our statement of the problem, our specific objectives, because this will be our guides later. Okay, so what are the characteristics or what are the features of the results section? Okay, so results section basically discuss in its concise manner. Okay, so the results section actually presents a clear, concise, and objective descriptions of the findings of your study. Okay, and in here, according to Daniel Kotz and Josen Calls, in their paper, Effective Writing and Publishing Scientific Papers, published by the Elsevier. Okay, so let me reiterate, resource section should be clear, should present a clear, concise, and objective description of the findings of our study. And in most cases, this is written in the past tense. The findings are presented without interpretation. Later, I'm going to discuss, elaborate some of these things like later. And then oftentimes, okay. And the next one is, oftentimes this is the shortest part of the paper. It's according to Cots and Calls, but of course you will find that there are other research articles with very lengthy result section. And of course, this is so because they also have lengthy data, or probably they have about two or three research questions. But anyway, so let's move on. What else? In here, the text should be short and objective without verbosity. This is, in addition, this is actually consistent with the first one that I've mentioned. The data need to be presented simply and clearly, since they represent new knowledge emerging in the world. It's according to Day, 1989. What else? Let's put in our mind, in developing our results section, let's be reminded that the purpose of the results section is to present the key results of our study, the key results. And also, if you are fond of reading research journals, you will find out that the results section will actually present an interplay between text and figures and tables. Now, I would suggest, I know that the reason why we are in this session, we are participating this activity because we would like to come up with an output out of this, and we would like to enhance our research capability in writing and packaging our papers. I would suggest that one of the best way of really harnessing this skill is actually to be reading a lot of research journals, because in there you will be able to find out what are the strategies and what are the ways of developing the different parts of the article. So in there, well, of course, that should form part of your review literature review. Uh, and of course, this is basically one of the most important part when you're conducting study. And I'm even encouraging my students to really go through before even conceiving, before proposing a title for their study, they need to be reading a lot of materials. They need to read a lot of research articles. Okay, so, but let me go back to my point. The results section is an interplay between text and figures and tables. So that's it. Now let's move on. We have here examples. It was emphasized a while ago that in presenting or discussing, developing your results section, we use past tense. Okay, this is an example here. I try to get an example of a research article published uh, by Samuel Ho and Katja Lee, entitled Computer Usage and its Relationship with Adolescent Lifestyle in Hong Kong. So you will notice that in the results section, so here is it, there is the figure and there is the textual description of the figure. But I have not shown the
Yut
figure.
hanin na pagkuanan audio hini yut.
Okay, so there you are. The authors in developing the results section made use of the past tense. So that's why they said chi-square analysis were used. Overall, 82% of the students reported, more female students attended, and so on. Okay, so that's how we write our results section. Okay, let's move on. Okay, so still using the same material. Okay, so this one is
Kailangan
Start.
it's the table. Okay, it's a graph. And of course, in here, okay, so these are some discussions in the results section related to the study on computer usage and its relationship to adolescent lifestyle. Okay, so later we will be discussing some of this data here. Okay, so let's move on. I am showing to you these tables, and a while ago I have shown to you graphs, and that is to show that in the results section you will see textual discussion, textual description of the result, and of course there you will also see accompanying tables and graphs. Now let's now move on to tips in writing the results section. So the first one here is, do you have questions? Are there questions from the participants? So, what?
Excuse me, ma'am.
Yes po, Miss
Ma'am,
Aika.
questions will be addressed afterwards your lecture.
Yeah, I
Yes, po.
understand there is that. Although I like to post, somehow I am raising or I'm asking these questions just to keep the audience awake. Probably, of course not. I'm just kidding. Okay, so I hope you're still there. Now, what you should do in writing the results section. Okay, number one, well, you need to remember those things that I've mentioned a while ago because they are basically the characteristics. We see this; those are in the previous slides that I've shown. They are you have known what's the function or the purpose. Why are we writing the results section? This time, let's move on to the some tips or some strategies in writing the resource section. Okay, one is we have to keep the storyline in our minds. Okay, so the findings should match and answer the research questions from the introduction using the procedures explained in the methods section. Now, one thing that I remember from one of my professors when I was still connected with the distance education at UPOU is, you see, our teachers, our professors would require us in every course that we are taking at UPOU, we are required to come up with a research paper, and this has to be either published or presented in reputable research forum. She would always tell us that in writing your result section or in writing your paper, writing the sections of your research article, okay, from introduction, there you have your methodology section. You always have to bear in your mind, aside from the storyline that Dr. O'Reilly has emphasized in his lecture, you should also be looking into your research questions. I suppose all of us here, majority if not all, are professors, are teachers from the DepEd, and we're all familiar of lesson plan. The lesson plan have objectives. So when we choose our strategies, when we choose our instructional materials, evaluation activities and all, we always go back to our research questions. We always go back to our objectives of our lesson. So similarly, I would say that when you develop the different sections of your research paper, you go back to your research question. Statement of the problem. So basically, when you develop your results section, always check from time to time what are your research questions, because you are going to use this in developing this particular section. Okay, so next, you write the text of the results section concisely and objectively. This was emphasized in the previous slides. You see here, the passive voice will likely dominate, but we can also use the active voice. Okay? I like to stress that we need to avoid repeating things. Avoid repetitive paragraph structures. And another thing is, in the results section, you do not interpret the data. You discuss what is found in the table and what's found in the figure, but in no way you interpret the data, because basically this is part of your discussion section. Now, let me give you an example here. Okay, so our first example there highlights the trend or the difference that the researcher wants the reader to focus. And in here you will see that for some of us, probably we would say that these two are just stressing or describing the result of the study, but of course, the two are different. Okay, so in the first description we have here, the duration of exposure to running water had a pronounced effect on cumulative seed germination percentages. There is an accompanying figure. Seeds exposed to the 2-day treatment had the highest cumulative germination, and that accounts 84%, which is actually 1.25 times that of a 12-hour or 5-day groups and 4 times that of controls. In this case, this example simply highlights the trend and the difference. But look at the second description that we had. Okay. So what we have here, the results of the germination experiment suggest that the optimal time for running water treatment is 2 days. This group showed the highest cumulative germination with that, okay, with longer 5 days or shorter 12 hours exposures, producing smaller gains in germination when compared to the control group. So in this case, you will notice in this example, okay, in contrast to the first one, for the first description, okay, this example states thought there is a subtle interpretation of the result of the study, which we are supposed to avoid when we are into the result, in the discussion of the result section. Okay, so now I have here, according to, this is according to Day. Okay, so there are some, for social sciences studies, health, social sciences studies, the author of the book on effective writing and publishing scientific papers has these suggestions. When developing your results section, first, you may describe the results section with a description of the recruitment or the response of the participants. Second one is you describe the characteristics of the study sample, which can be presented either in a table or a figure. By the way, aside from the suggestion of cots and calls can actually be used even in some clinical studies. Okay, so these are supposed to be the structure of your result section. Okay, you describe the result. You describe the recruitment or response of the participants, and then you move on to the characteristics of the study sample. Okay, what about the third? Just a moment. Okay, let me show you an example here. Making use of the study. Just a moment. The study is entitled. Okay, this is a latest study, which I got from the Google Scholar, from one journal. Okay, it's a nationwide survey of psychological distress among Chinese people in COVID-19 epidemic implications and policy recommendations. Okay, so now look at this. If we go back to two, okay, the two steps, suggested steps by Cox. Okay, so let's see how do the authors develop their results section. Okay, let's take a look at the results section. Okay, here, if you look at it, the first sentences, okay, the first sentence of the results section discussed. What did the authors discuss? Okay, so the response, okay, participation rate. Okay, the study received a total of 52,730 valid responses from 36 provinces, autonomous regions, and municipalities, as well as from Hong Kong, Macau, and Taiwan by 10 February 2020. If you move on to the next descriptions or to the next statements, you will find out that the author is now trying to describe the respondents of the study. So that's why in there, let's see how many were males out of the total valid responses or the total respondents. How many were males and how many were females? Take note that he made use of the mean and standard deviation because later this is practically an important part in the description of our results section. Okay, so the mean CPDI score of the sample was 23.65, while the one that is enclosed is actually the standard deviation, and so on. Okay, so that's it. Let's now move on. There's another study. It's a cross-country comparative study on stress and quality of life in nursing students. Okay, this is mainly authored by Dr. Eudoro Labragi. I think Dr. Labragi is here. Dr. Labragi is one of our, is the editor-in-chief of the university CDRJ, and he is one of, this man has a lot of papers published in reputable journals. Okay, so making use of this particular study, so let's see how did they develop the results section. Okay, here, that's it. Look at the first sentence. It conforms to the first description, first tip that I have mentioned. And the next, okay, in the next sentences, there we have the description of the respondents of the study. Okay, so let's now move on. Aside from those things, again, COTS is also advising, telling us that in developing our result section, we can begin with the discussion of data from the primary analysis. Okay, it's followed by the secondary data analysis. And of course, we can end our results section, if applicable, with short paragraph on some additional findings. Okay, so that's it. Now let's move on. We are still on some tips and strategies in writing the results section. We have only mentioned of two. We shifted to the suggestion of one author when writing this section, using when you are into clinical health and social sciences studies. But other things that we need to remember are this. One is we have to use the same order when presenting the data. Okay, so we always have to report findings. When you are into experimental studies, it is suggested that you report your findings from the experimental group before you discuss, before you move on to the control group. Another suggestion in writing the results section is we need to provide effect sizes such as odd ratios or relative risk together with their 95% confidence intervals. Never report results without, never report results with only p-values. Next one is, of course, considering that in the results section, you will be presenting tables and graphs. It is imperative that we have to be consistent with the use of our decimals. So if you are use one decimal, then that should be used all throughout for consistency purposes. Okay, so let's move on. We have to make consistent use of, yeah, I mentioned that already. We have to present measures of central tendency together with the appropriate measures of variability. Now, I have shown to you examples of journal articles. One article has something to do with COVID, and the other one was the paper of Dr. Labrage. And you will know that you must have seen that in the results section, there is the description in there. You will know that in the description, there is the presence of there is that mean enclosed, there is a figure for the standard deviation. So if you are using the median, then you can actually you can have the interquartile range. We use mean with standard deviation, and while median we use interquartile range. So the two figures are actually discussed or presented side by side with each other. Okay, so next is, there are still things here, okay? There is one example. Okay, let's have, if citing, if you have question, in your study, if you have this question like, is the average height of male students the same as the female heights in a pool of randomly selected biology majors? So in this case, just a moment. Okay, so in here, of course, definitely you need to collect the height of the respondents, male and female. And in your descriptions, you need to calculate the descriptive statistics. And so in your results section, you indicate the mean, the standard deviation. And of course, we also have here the sample size, the range, and the others. But in your descriptive statistics, you may consider citing the mean and the standard deviation. In a course where statistical tests are not employed, you should visually inspect these plots. Suppose you found that the male biology majors are, on the average, 12.5 centimeters taller than the female majors. So this might be an answer to the question that you posed. Okay, so let's move on. I see this one as an important tip that we need to consider as writers, as researchers. We always have to present the absolute number of cases in addition to relative measures. Okay, what does it mean and how do we use this in packaging our results section? The percentage. Okay, say for example, in the discussion, we say the percentage was, I think there is a problem. It should be, the percentage was 22% in the intervention group compared with 15% in the control group. Now, in some cases, we would see journals with only 22% and 15%, and they do not indicate in there 33 over 150, 23 over 150. So uh, according to our authors, COTS and calls, it is necessary that we write the relative measures. We present these values here. Okay, we present the number of cases. Okay, so 22 from in here we would be able, I repeat, it's not just 22, but 22%. Okay, so in that case, we will know 22%. Baka, is it 22? 22 over 100? Baka konti lang, but in this case, we would be able to see that the 20%, of course, 22 is 33 over, there are 150 respondents and 33 of those are into this, whatever. In other words, it's important that we have this, the absolute number of cases. Okay, so let's move on. We have to report results. Okay, report the results so as to provide as much information as possible to the reader about the nature of differences or relationships. These are also things that we see in the results sections. Okay, so let's come up with an example when we're talking about testing differences and testing relationships. Okay, so if you are testing for differences among groups, citing two groups A and B, and you find a significant based from the table, the statistical table, you've found that there is a significant difference. So it is not just enough to say it is not sufficient to simply report that groups A and B were significantly different. We often see this in most of our undergraduate thesis. Of course, since I'm handling a research subject in the university, I would find my students just simply reporting or telling the readers, telling us that groups A and B were significantly different. So we're not supposed to stop there. The question is, how are they different? How much are they different? Okay, so to improve, or the best way in here is we can actually say group A individuals were 23% larger than those in B, or it would be better if we'd say group B pops gained weight as twice the rate of group A pops. Okay, report the direction of the differences. Is it greater, larger, or smaller? Then we would say, well, we just do not give a very good description of the result of our study. Okay, so the magnitude of differences, you can even consider what's the percent of difference or how many times whenever possible. So what I'm saying is, let's have a better description of the results of our study. But in describing it, let's be cautious not to give interpretation. We could probably say uh, the males are the the height of the males are twice that of the weight of the females or whatever. So we can probably give that descriptions. Not that you will only say there is a difference between the height of the males and the females, or there is a statistically significant difference between this group and the other group. Okay, so let's now move on. Another tip is for us to organize the results section based on the sequence of the table and figures you will include, of course. This is, I think it's obvious we need to do this. Next one is statistical test summaries, test name, the p-value, okay? We have to take note that they are usually reported parenthetically in conjunction with the biological results they support. Okay, so if you are fond of reading results and discussion, you will find that this one is really in place and the authors and researchers are really following this guide. Okay, another point, okay, always report your results. This was mentioned. This parenthetical reference should include the statistical test used and the level of significance. Okay, so let's have this example. This is part of the results section of one of the studies. We have males, okay. We include this figures here. Average 12.5 centimeters taller than the females. Why do we say so? Okay, because of these figures. Okay, so these are things I have mentioned of about 11. These are some tips that we need to bear in mind when we actually present when we develop our results section. Okay, so let me see. So that's it. So with these tips, I hope with these discussions in developing our results sections, I hope that we will be able to really come up with to write our results section. We can now develop a better results section compared to the previous results sections of our research journals. Okay, so that's all for this afternoon. So my discussion is only along these two subtopics, choosing data and developing a results section of our journal article. Okay, so that's it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Labid, for an informative and comprehensive topic in choosing data and writing the results. So right now, if you have some questions, please type them into the question box. And please be reminded that we will accommodate 5 questions only. and then I will read your questions. Then it will be answered by our lecturer, which is Dr. Labid, right away. So queries will be addressed one at a time. So you could now post your questions.
While others probably are still thinking of some questions. There is, I think, had I in the results section, it's actually good if we will also be reminded as to how are we going to present our tables. Okay, so there are actually guides as to how are we going to present our tables, statistical tables. I am referring to statistical tables. For us who are aiming to publish research articles, it is not enough, or we cannot just delegate all the statistical work to our statistician. So I would still say that we need to be able to understand, we need to know how to present our statistical tables properly. Okay, so that's it. Let me see.
Again, if you have questions,
I do not see where's my chat tags.
Nagtatype pa dahil. Maray pas, maray pas.
Uh, I do not know. For some of us, I'm speaking of those who are into those who are developing their master's thesis and sometimes and doctoral dissertation. Sometimes, just like what I've mentioned a while ago, sometimes we do not actually, how do I say this? Sometimes we are not so familiar with numbers, and sometimes some of us do not want to be considering numbers, or we don't like analyzing things. So sometimes we would ask assistance from our statisticians. And so when we develop our chapter 4 section of our thesis and dissertation, sometimes gipapaubayan na lang natin. Sometimes we give that to our statisticians. Sometimes we would say, well, it's not my it's not my task anymore. No, that should not be the case. So as researchers, we really have to mind our data, and we should also be we should really be part in analyzing and even in discussing the data in our results section. There is one question here. Let me see.
Yes po, ma'am.
I'll just read the question, ma'am. Okay, so is it mandatory that all problem statement down to objectives must be reflected in the result analysis? Yeah, I suppose, yes. Now you see, your research questions becomes your guide. When you develop your result section, you actually you actually look into, when you develop your resource section, you look into your research questions as your guide. Like say, for example, I'm taking of most of the research questions of the master's thesis, like first, what is the profile of the student respondents, blah, 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 blah. Okay, so in that case, in your results section, that should be, of course, there's an introductory statement, introductory discussion of your study, and then of course the next one is you are going to answer that first question. What is the profile of your student respondents? But of course, there are other authors who are not actually doing that. They do not actually describe their they do not describe their participants or respondents of the study in the results section, but they are relocating that in the methodology section as participants. Description of the participants sometimes in other journals is part of the methodology section. Okay, so but aside from that, when we move on to other questions like what's the knowledge level of the respondents and all. So again, you need to answer that question in your result section. And in your thesis or in your dissertation, if you have about 3 questions, then I suppose that in your results section, you also have these 3 subheadings. This as part of your discussion of your research questions. Is it mandatory that all problems must be reflected in the result analysis? Yeah, okay, so
Excuse me, ma'am. There is also another question.
yes po, I am reading the
Yes,
question.
from
There is
Ma'am
one question.
Honrales.
Yes po, I am reading it. Okay, how do we present tables in APA form? Okay, so how do we present tables in APE form? Okay, this is one thing that I did not actually consider. Miss Cynthia, okay, so I did not study. You see, what I have here is the normal way of presenting our tables. I tried to look into that a while ago while I was preparing my slides, but I did not really focus my study on presenting our papers or presenting our tables using the APA form. Okay, so what else? And okay,
There is
so
another question, ma'am,
yes po.
from Ma'am
Yes,
Joy
ma'am.
Beleng.
Yes po, ma'am. Is it found here in our?
Yes po.
Or,
The question is, any advice on results from qualitative research?
okay, so when we talk about qualitative research, you see, most of my discussions are only into it's the general way of presenting our resource section. But if you look at this, you will find out that most of these tips are actually what uh, researchers into who are into quantitative research, quantitative research. So most of these tips that I mentioned to you this afternoon are actually tips that we can use when presenting, um, especially quantitative researches. But I'd like to tell you that in a qualitative, okay, yon nag-pop up na. Okay, so in a qualitative type of research, uh, we have a different way. We have a different way of presenting our result. Okay, so in here, when I have students who are into qualitative research, depending on what approach are they using, they're using Colizzi approach or whatever approach there is, then what I would usually do is to advise them to look for papers that the research at the look for papers in research journals where there is this kind of research paper and try to see how do they uh, present the result discussions or the results section. Because I suppose for every type or for every type of qualitative research, there is a different way of presenting our results.
So we're done accommodating 3 questions. So right now we'll be waiting for 2 questions only. Please don't hesitate to ask questions, clarifications to our lecturer. So we have here, ma'am, another question. Hi, ma'am, from Ma'am Maynard Kapil. In qualitative type of research, do you think root cause analysis can use to support the results?
Okay, so speaking of qualitative type of research, so what I can say, Mr. Maynard, for now, I'm not really so, just like what I mentioned a while ago, my studies, most of my studies are into quantitative, making use of algorithm and other things. So I'm not really so conversant with qualitative type of research. So though I have ideas of qualitative research, but for now, I'd rather not, because I might not be able to answer your question correctly. Yeah, I would appreciate, do we have here? Okay, so I'd like to, there is here our editor-in-chief of the CDRJ and one of our consultants would like to share something related to the formatting, formulation, would like to share something. May I know what's the, Miss Aika?
Yeah, good afternoon, Doctor.
Yeah, yes, go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is just very brief with regards to formatting tables and figures because I think most of our participants have their thesis and dissertation and they're planning to publish it in journal.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm going to give you some pointers just before you format your tables for submission to journal. The first thing that you need to do before you format your tables is to check the journal requirements. That is the initial step. Identify which journal you are submitting your paper, and then try to read what is the requirement of the journal with regards to the tables.
Okay.
Because each journal have their own requirements. Like for example, there are some journals that would require authors to submit 5 tables. And that is based on my experience. Most Elsevier and Wiley journals would allow only authors to submit 5 tables. But you know, your thesis and dissertation, you have up to 50 tables. And that is one of the challenges that you have to do, and you have to plan for it. And the second one is, if it is not possible to reduce the number of tables, the good thing is there are journals that allow authors to submit supplemental materials. And you need to check that in your journal also. Now, another tip that I can give is that if you are planning to send a paper to a specific journal, it is best if you can check a sample of their published paper and try to check how the tables, how the figures are presented in their articles. That would help you, that would guide you when you format your tables and figures. Thank you, Dr. Sherry Ann. That's it.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Labrague. Thank you so much. Okay, Dr. Labrague has a lot of research papers and he is really good in here. And that's good. He was able to share to us how to format our tables. Now, let me point out that this was actually mentioned in the first portion of our lecture. in choosing our data. Okay, that's it. That is true that the reason why, if you are publishing our paper in a journal, we cannot actually make use of all the data that we have. We cannot present all the tables that we have in our thesis and in our dissertation. That's why we only have to choose our data, because just like what Dr. Labragi has mentioned a while ago, there are some journals who do not allow us to publish a paper with so many tables and graphs. That's why we have to be very careful in choosing our data. Thank you again, Dr. Labragi. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Labage, for additional inputs. So right now, before we proceed for the last question, please be reminded that the links of the Google Forms for attendance and session evaluation will be sent to our chat box. So right now, we'll be waiting for the last question, if you still have any. Okay, I guess that would end our session for today. Thank you so much for joining us here. We gained a lot of knowledge in choosing data and rating the results, what the Dr. Labid had discussed to us this afternoon. So again, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you too for having me here. Thank you so much.
And for announcement po, the next session will be on Monday. Yes. So it will start at exactly 2 p.m. So thank you so much, everyone. God bless.
Thank you.
From our humble beginnings, we began to shine. Taking little footsteps, we began to climb. Near or far, we have reached across summer. From Maloka, Mercedes, Bahamas, and Basay. From our halls, we walk their rise. Achievements and awards now we prize. Join us and we'll show you the greatness of SS2. Summer State University, soaring high with excellence. Seeds of innovation will build and serve the nation. Summer State University, it's the best for you and me. Your future and dreams come alive. So come on to Summer State University. Summer State University.